The 4 Democratic congresswomen of color targeted in President Trump's recent attacks are weighing in on the controversy. Representatives Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar, and Rashida Tlaib are firing back at the president's racist tweets.
Yesterday, the House of Representatives voted to condemn President Trump's tweets, even as most Republicans defended him. The congresswomen sat down with CBS This Morning co-host Gayle King for a rare interview.
Quoting the president yesterday, "You all are people who hate our country with a passion. You hate Jewish people, and you love enemies like Al-Qaeda." You hear those statements coming from the President of the United States to describe you all, and you think what?
I think that America has always been a story, and America has always been about the triumph of people who fight for everyone versus those who want to preserve rights for just a select few. And there is no bottom to the barrel of vitriol that will be used and weaponized to stifle those who want to advance rights for all people in the United States.
We can talk about and spin out on about hateful words, which are a predictable prompt by the occupant of this White House, and I call him that. Not because I don't have respect for the Oval Office.
But it sounds like you don't have respect for the Oval Office when you call the President of the United States the occupant.
No, because he is only occupying the space. He does not embody the principles, the responsibility, the grace, the integrity of a true president. And so for that reason, I'm not dishonoring the office. He does every day. Mm-hmm. This is a distraction. This is a disruption on our leading and legislating and governing on the issues of care and concern and consequence of the American people.
What did you think when you heard the tweet?
For me, I'm hearing about this from folks saying, did you see what the president just said? At the same time that I'm getting text messages from people saying, Rashida, what can we do? I heard ICE is now knocking on doors without warrants. I'm trying to represent my district. It's a very diverse district, 20 different ethnicities, and I'm trying to fight on their behalf, trying to make sure that they have a voice here. At the same time, I'm dealing with the biggest bully I've ever had to deal with in my lifetime, and trying to push back on that and trying to do the job that we all have been sent here to do, which is centered around the people at home. This is a distraction. This is a person that really wants to vilify, demonize not only immigrants, but even communities of color, as many of my sisters here have been talking about. It is very much a distraction, getting us unfocused.
It's interesting that you all use the word distraction, that he is trying to distract away from real issues. You know, it's been said about the 4 of you that the 4 of you are a distraction, that you're playing right into the president's hands. What do you say to people, and you have your critics too, who say that you all are also a distraction?
The insinuation of that question in itself is a distraction. I think he wants you to focus on that. And you should be asking, why is it that we are being criticized? What is it that we bring to this body?
I'll tell you what we bring.
Exactly.
We're an extension of a movement in our country that wants Medicare for all, that wants us to end mass incarceration, that wants us to push back against the attacks on communities of color. I mean, I think all of us have incredibly strong residents in our district that have spoke volumes in electing people like us.
And we are a disruption to the business as usual that's been Washington.
But
right? We were elected for that purpose.
Just add that each of us represent very different districts.
Yes.
Right. And each of us bring our unique and authentic voice to this body. We govern in our own way. What we are 4 women who have an alignment of values, shared policy priorities. There is no insurgency here. There's nothing conspiratorial.
There is no insurgency here.
There is no insurgency and there's nothing conspiratorial. What we are 4 lawmakers who happen to land in the same place on the same issue time and time again.
So for more on this, we want to bring in a CBS News Chief Washington correspondent, Major Garrett. We're always very pleased when we can have you in the flesh and blood. Yes.
Indeed.
So let us talk about...
I'm always glad to appear in
the flesh and blood. Yeah, you typically do, as I understand it, but not at the desk.
I am not comfortable with hologram Major. I just simply am not. Okay, I'm totally and ultrably opposed to hologram Major.
Leave it to Major to lighten things up before we go in deep. So we heard what the congresswomen there nicknamed the squad had to say, and I thought it was very interesting that they talked about this being a distraction by the president. The president has often been accused of manufacturing sort of a scandal in order to distract. By the same token, perhaps it's a distraction, but it is something worthy of talking about. You know, this tweet and then the resolution to follow and the way Republicans, the vote basically came down essentially along party lines. The way Republicans have responded or not responded to this tweet, I think is very telling. So do we talk about this as a distraction? And don't get distracted by continuing to have the conversation.
Right.
Or do we talk about these tweets?
So distraction is an interesting concept in all of this. For the president and those who support him, it's a means by which to get to a deeper issue. So it's not a distraction for them, it's a device, okay? You say something factually erroneous, incendiary, and with deep racist history in this country. Go back to where you came from. Look, don't listen to me. Listen to Anthony Scaramucci, who for 10 days was the communications director for Donald Trump. He said on CNN yesterday, my grandparents emigrated to this country and they were told to go back to where they came from. I'm not going to let the president off the hook on this. That's Anthony Scaramucci, who was close, lived in the inner circle of the Trump administration.
He's a loyalist.
A loyalist, says he wants the president to be reelected, but he's not going to let him off the hook on this. Not going to call what is something obvious that which it isn't. He's going to say what it is. Those are his words, not mine. So take that from a member of the Trump inner circle who says this is clearly racist. And in its lineage in this country, always used to hurt and inflict harm and to make people feel less than they actually are in America. So just take that at its face value.
Right.
So why is it a device? To get to some other larger motive. What is the motive? To make Democrats circle the wagons around these four and to suggest all Democrats are either socialist, the newest one is communist, something so radical, so outside the mainstream as to be something we should be collectively afraid of. That's the device. Now, for the four members of Congress, they say we're not going to be distracted by this accusation from the work we came here to do, duly elected by our constituents, because we came here with a mandate to pursue big change. And on this area, I would say, notice the similarity between the president and these four lawmakers. What does the president always say? Never give up. Fight for what you believe in. Those four congresswomen told Gayle King, the win sometimes is in the fight. Until you achieve total victory, you have to keep fighting, and we're not going to give up. On that ground, they and the president completely agree.
So I also think of this word distraction, and I think in a way the president putting out this racist tweet is a way to shine a light on a situation that has always existed here, which is that people that look different or have different sounding names are often told to go back to where you came from, even though I always would say in the case of myself that I'm from Queens and before that my mother's womb. Like that is where I come from, right? But the fact that he's focused on this and that they're pointing this out, I think is sort of interesting because you've got now Republicans that are trying to figure out a way to finesse their statements on these tweets by saying, well, the president didn't mention race or the president isn't talking about race. Lindsey Graham comes out. He's one of the ones who said that these women are communists. And there is audio of Lindsey Graham on the campaign trail saying that Donald Trump is a racist. And now Donald Trump doesn't have a racist bone in his body.
Right.
How does that work?
Because, again, a device to create another conversation. Who's the radical in this conversation? Am I the radical standing up for America and I love America, and if you don't love America, you can leave? Wait a minute. First, he said, go back to where you came from, which is not the same as if you don't love America, you're invited to leave. Those are completely different intellectual arguments. But that's how they've morphed because the president, as the president, always has the last word or nearly the last word or tries to have the last word. Republicans don't know what to do with this on any intellectual, structural basis. But guess what? In the era of Trump, you don't have to anymore. What you have to do for Republicans is show loyalty, find some means by which you can swallow your either revulsion or disgust or discomfort, and find a way to say, yes, but there's something bigger, and the bigger is their agenda is so dangerous. Well, if it's so dangerous, then argue it out on a policy basis. Have an upfront, say, you know what? They're a duly elected member of Congress. I validate that. Here's what they want to do. Here's what I want to do. And let's have that conversation. But no, no, no. And that, to me, suggests, if not a structural insecurity about these arguments, an unwillingness to actually have it for some other reason, if not structural insecurity. But I'm dying for the day when we have an actual debate about these underlying policies and which ones can work and which ones can't.
Hey, isn't that what campaigns are supposed to be about?
Exactly.
So I was speaking to Caitlin Huey-Burns about the 2020 campaign, and she suggested something that I never really thought of before, that, you know, the circumstances are very, very different for the president today compared to the last time he ran. And, you know, the last time he ran, it was coming off of Barack Obama. And so she didn't say this, but I'm saying this. In a sense, there was an other. It was Barack Obama, the first African-American president, right? We don't have that
and
this
then they
time
had
around.
Hillary Clinton,
right? And Hillary
that.
Clinton.
Right.
We don't have that this time around, right? And so
There's no boogeyman.
right.
There's boogie women.
But with you know, one of the things that the president does very well is fight. And who do you fight when there isn't another? You have to create another.
That's a good point.
And for Trump supporters, the fight is about a lot of things. The media, Washington, the institutional decay or rot thereof. Interestingly, the 4 first-year congresswomen also said they're here to deal with the rot of Washington, all the status quo things, the way things have always been done, the timidity about dealing with hard issues in a tough, aggressive way, like Medicare for all, which is not the majority opinion within the Democratic caucus. They're outliers. But guess what? Outliers cause attention, discord, discomfort. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but they are always remembered. And right now, these 4 first-year members of Congress have achieved far more recognition. What they have to do with that recognition is create an atmosphere of persuasion. That's the next thing. But at least they've created, at least in our era now, notoriety, which is the beginning springboard to maybe accomplishing something. Whether they do or not, that's entirely up to them, the Democratic caucus, and our entire congressional legislative process. But that they are advocating and advocating aggressively for that which they campaigned on is part and parcel of our entire experiment.
Let me just ask you one last question about 2020, Major. Clearly, this is the president's strategy, if you can call it that, for holding on to the presidency. And you see Republicans not willing to engage in the way that Justin Amash did for fear of what happened to Justin Amash. I wonder, though, that strategy for the presidency, to win the presidency, does it work if you are running for the Senate or if you're running for Congress? I get it with the gerrymandering, but if you think that this blue wave that happened in the midterms, the president may say, look, my base is going to come out and vote for me again in 2020. But for all these other Republicans who are hitching their wagon to the president's, is that enough for them to win? Because you see the sentiment and you see what the demographics are showing. And even in some of these gerrymandered districts, I wonder how many of these Republicans are safe in taking the positions that they're taking.
When I first started covering presidential politics in the early 90s, pollsters and strategists for both parties would tell me something that I think is interesting in this context. The suburbs don't like to discuss race. They just don't. It makes them feel uncomfortable because it's a complicated American history. It's an issue that's very fraught with emotion. The history is uncomfortable to suburbanites, particularly white suburbanites. They just would rather not have it. Trump looked at that and said, forget it. No, we're going to talk about race, and I'm going to inject myself into that conversation as a way of proclaiming some other deeper American set of values. So that whole assumption about, ooh, race is uncomfortable and I'd rather not deal with it, Trump sets all that aside, willingly takes on the accusation of being a racist, because he believes that accusation has lost effectively its meaning. It doesn't mean what it used to, and he can either defend himself or mount a defense sufficient to satisfy his base. And though he is no longer a part of the Trump inner circle, remember the words of Steve Bannon when he was the chief strategist for the campaign and early on in the White House. He said on the record, every time we are talking about race in this country, we win. Meaning those who hear the Trump message rally to us in ways they never did for John McCain or Mitt Romney. That's his words again, not mine. And I would suggest in all these matters, listen to what those people say both Anthony Scaramucci on one side and Steve Bannon, a voice from the past, on the other, about the underlying assumptions. One thing about politics, though, assumptions only last until there's a different result. Things work until they don't. The president's betting what worked in 2016 will work in 2020. Has the country evolved? Has the country come to a different conclusion? Is its demographics different? Or is its attitudes about these underlying things either more solidified because people weren't really sure what they were going to get with Trump in 2016? Do they have a better, sharper view of that now? And if so, what is their reaction? All of that will be tested in 2020.
Man, that is interesting.
Yeah,
Major Garrett,
really.
thank you so much.
Sure.